Thank you. Hi. So as all with all these talks, we have to start off with making you believe that you should trust me. I do distributed systems. That has been my background. It's a big term now, and with everybody working on the web, it doesn't mean as much. But it encompasses all of the things that I've done in the industry. I've worked on anti-spam, I've worked on databases, I've worked on web servers, I've worked on some things called trust and safety that are a little too vague to describe here. And along the way, I found that while I enjoyed the difficulties of distributed systems, there was a moral imperative that I start working on crypto systems. What I'm going to be talking about here today is biased. I have a bias towards private conversations. I believe in the power and the humanity of private acts, and I want those to be secured for the future. If we can whisper inside of our own homes to our families and friends and loved ones, I want to ensure that we can still do that in the digital world as well. Okay, whew, super serious, guys. So I'm talking about green locks. What am I talking about when I say green locks? I'm talking about these things. They show up in your browser when you, the web service developer, deploys HTTPS. That's it. HTTPS, of course, is encryption for the web. And encryption is a necessity. And we're going to have to walk a garden path while we talk about this stuff. There's some things that you obviously need when you're working on the web to encrypt between the client browser and the server. The obvious stuff is passwords, credit card numbers, personally identifiable information like IP, like a geographic location, mother's maiden name, social security number, equivalent stuff in Canada, of course. But then also you have to deal with the fact that you have to encrypt session cookies in JavaScript. Session cookies can be trivially ripped off by somebody who's on the hotel Wi-Fi with you, like the unencrypted one we have here. And JavaScript as well can be injected, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And, well, everything. We have to encrypt everything. And what do I mean by everything? Well, I'm going to describe some of those everythings by talking about events that have been happening in the world. I want to be really clear here. I didn't go researching and try to find the best examples. These next few slides are some things that I just came up with off the top of my head from things I've been reading about, the things I've been seeing. The first one is the Great Canon distributed denial of service attack on GitHub. This was performed by a large nation state who shall remain nameless. There is a web service in China called Baidu. It's basically the Google of China. Very big, very popular, does lots of different things. They had a JavaScript code on one of their pages that was being downloaded using an HTTP unencrypted link. That means that the browsers were unable to verify that the data coming down to them was from the actual server that it was supposed to. So a certain large nation state attacker, it's believed, it certainly happened, took over the DNS for some of those servers. They poisoned the DNS in some root servers. They redirected that traffic over to their own servers. And instead of serving the typical JavaScript that they were supposed to be adding, they added a little bit extra to the end. And that little bit of extra code at the end of that JavaScript sent tons of random garbage to GitHub. And Baidu is popular enough and big enough that GitHub, for days going on weeks, either outages, partial or total, huge amounts, because bad guys were able to take over a little bit of code on a plain text connection, because the server did not actually have to verify that they were really the right server for that domain. And we're seeing kind of similar behavior happening in the commercial world as well. Comcast and other ISPs have been caught adding ads that the publishers do not want onto publishers' websites. This has been happening regularly now. Anything that's happening over a plain text connection, they're man-in-the-middling, they're taking and changing and replacing the content that was previously there. Now, of course, if you can do this for commercial reasons, you can also do this for certain repressive regimes. And as we move into a world of Internet of Things, we're going to also see this kind of behavior with sensor data. You want to get around environmental regulation, you fake the data coming from the sensors that were installed. I also want to talk about VTech. VTech is a children's toy manufacturer. They make these cool little toys that kids can play with and send video and audio messages to themselves, kind of screw around with the video and put them up. VTech, all their toys, send the video and audio to their own servers. Those servers got broken into. Because VTech does not do end-to-end encryption, with separation of key privilege, keeping the keys on different machines from the encrypted data, they didn't even encrypt the video data at all. The videos and audio of 6.4 million children are in the hands of someone. We don't know who. And of course, one of the ones that inspired me many years ago, the revelations that the NSA is collecting all of the internet's data, all of it, unencrypted and encrypted. They provided with simple keystrokes, search terms, search queries that their agents could use to identify anything. You want to find open cookies from wherever, from unencrypted websites, easy to do. Pick the target. And that means not just people that they were interested in, not just people who were bad actors, not just people who they had warrants for, but all of us, any of us, talking about anything that we might not want to share with everyone. And that includes the simple little session cookies from an unencrypted website that somebody thought wasn't important enough. That eventually leads to, through a series of attacks, escalating privileges through their lives. There's even a name internally inside of the NSA for the kind of intelligence done by the jilted lovers inside of the agency who use the techniques that the tools and techniques they have from the NSA to spy on ex-boyfriends and ex-girlfriends. They call it love-int. Like SIGINT, like HUMINT, signals intelligence, human intelligence. There's also love intelligence. These are important, big tools. And because the internet is, for the majority, not encrypted, these are trivial for them to check in on anybody. And I want to be clear here that there's a rule to pay attention to when you're talking about nation states. That if one nation state is able to do it, the other ones can as well. They either are already, or will try to very quickly to catch up. So I've been talking a lot about the negative events in the world that have been leading towards encryption being a necessity. Let's talk about some of the more positive ones. Browsers are currently starting to block what they're calling powerful features. It's actually the query term you can plug in to figure out what the hell they're doing. They're saying things like geolocation should not be allowed over plain text requests, and they're going to start blocking those kinds of powerful features. Similarly with webcam video, audio, if it's not happening over HTTPS, it's too much of a security risk, and they're going to block that feature from your site. Those are good changes. Also, HTTP2 is seriously great. It's a huge performance win. It's also a huge bug win because it's a much simpler protocol. It's much easier to reason about as a designer. It's also much faster, especially in the third world. The latencies because of multiplexing, and I have an entire separate talk about how great HTTP2 is. But the browser vendors have said that they're only going to support it over TLS, mostly because the middle boxes like web accelerators and other antivirus software that interpret HTTP1 and proxy it on don't do so well in the public. So it needs TLS. We have reasons to require encryption in this modern day. There are things that we need to be thinking about as engineers, ethical choices that we need to be making. Here's a puppy. Take a break. Okay, so the encryption is necessary. The web needs to be encrypted. Every HTTPS site needs a certificate because it uses this protocol called TLS, yada, yada, yada. You may remember your asymmetric encryption classes from recently. And certificates on the web include, among other things, the domain that they're supposed to be for, as well as the public key data for the website. Certificates will allow those secure connections. The browsers use some of the public key data and their own public key and their private key to make a secure connection up to the server. Got it? All right. The browsers have to trust that the certificate that they got is really for the domain that they're supposed to be getting it from. That a bad guy hasn't just man in the middle and created a new certificate that is their own. And that means trusting certificates. But browsers can't keep a cache of every certificate ever. That would blow out everybody's hard drive for one. And two, the churn is really high. And there's a bunch of other reasons. So what instead browsers do is they trust certain organization certs. They call certificates root certs. They're deployed with the browser. Those organizations are called certificate authorities. Certificate authorities have a couple of jobs. The big one is when somebody wants to get an HTTPS website and they want a new certificate for a given domain, example.com, they go to a CA with their public key data and they say, please sign cryptographically this certificate. And the CAs go, great, please prove that you can control this domain by adding this data on this maybe path on their website or here in their DNS. And the CA's job is to prove that they control that domain and then cryptographically sign it. And they can also CAs can also sign other CA certs, which will become important in a sec. So when a browser comes to a website, it's got to check the cert. They got to check that they can trust the certificate. So they look at to see what certificate authority has cryptographically signed that certificate. If it's in their root certs, then they go, great, we're done here. This is we trust the CA that produced this. That CA has a good job of validating control, and we're done. Of course, if the CA isn't, there's also other CAs that may not yet be in the root certs, because there's always more growing over time. New companies come up, new CAs come up, old ones die. They may also have to look at see what other CAs have signed that CA that signed that leaf certificate for the domain. All right, so there's like chain of trust stuff. And of course, if all the signatures matched, you're good to go. That matches the domain and the cert, great. Congratulations, you now understand the certificate authority system. This is one of the most, when you learn about the certificate authority system, you go, wait, it's a bunch of commercial entities that have only self-regulate and have no, well, what's the oversight? And you go, well, we just kind of, the browsers and the CAs, we get together. There's a forum. We decide what the rules are. We actually give each other audits. We say what the baseline requirements are. But it's still kind of weird because you tilt your head and you go, huh? It's amazing though. It's kind of like when you figure out that money's not real, that nothing has value, right? Like we're all just kind of comparing relative values. And this is just relative trust values. Okay. But I said free green locks in my talk. What's important about free? Well, okay, certificates cost money. The CAs can't just run for free. You see, there are some recent exceptions. The majority, until very, very recently, and we're going to get to that, the majority of the places that gave you free certs usually had onerous terms on it, like you couldn't use it for a commercial website, or you had very high revocation fees, stuff like that. That's starting to change. But certificates cost money because securing systems is difficult. Like it's actually hard to keep the private key data for a CA private. They're a very high value target, especially any of them that have a root certificate. That's a place that attackers want to get into. And so you have to spend a lot of time and a lot of money on audits, on security. So what that means is HTTPS costs money because HTTPS is encryption for the web. HTTPS is a necessity that costs money. We are required to pay money to do this. And now, a related question is, why isn't HTTPS adoption as high as, say, DNS? Everybody knows that they have to pay a little bit of cash in order to get a domain. It's a straight up requirement. So why, if HTTPS is so important to us as people, why aren't we all doing it right now? Well, it's another thing to justify doing. It's a choice you have to make. And it's one that, unlike DNS, has not been socialized as an absolute requirement. It's almost like we're kind of okay with plugging in IP addresses into our web browser, right? There's also another thing about encryption, and especially HTTPS, which is that you just can't play with it. Because you have to know what a CSR is, maybe what ECC is, what PEMs are, what DERF encoding is. There's all these big giant bytes you have to take off all at once. That keeps people out. It's also expensive to test, because you have to actually if you want to test to learn how to get a certificate from a CA, you actually have to go through their entire sign-up process. Maybe pay $10, $15. Get it wrong a couple of times, then maybe you have to pay more if you get it wrong again. And the migration path was super unclear. Going from HTTP to HTTPS, if you tried doing HTTPS on a domain and then included HTTP files and links on there, you would get weird mixed content errors and things would break on you. That looked not good. People didn't like that. And so this ignorance and complexity bred fear. And that ignorance and complexity that bred disuse. We haven't been as good about this as an industry, as a community, as we need it. And so we need free green locks. We need certificates that are cheap and easy to play with, because we want them to be used more, because it's a necessity. And we need to allow for learning some, but not all of cryptography in order to do this. Here's another puppy. I really like the rolls on him. I want to pitch him. So HTTPS is going big. It's a necessity. We have all this work to do. We're knowing what the risks are. Off the top of my head, I was able to list like 4 or 5 of these things that were serious events. And browsers are pushing for HTTPS. They're killing off features that are not on HTTP. And we've also got these new migration tools like HSTS and the CSP upgrade and secure request stuff. These are techniques for upgrading a site from HTTP to HTTPS. Especially the CSP one's going to be really great in the next year. OK, but how do we actually make HTTPS easy to play with and easy to install and play with? Well, that's where this project called Let's Encrypt gets involved. Let's Encrypt is a project that I've been helping out on as a consultant for the last few months. We recently launched. We are a nonprofit certificate authority that gives out free certificates. Thank you. The goal of the Let's Encrypt project is to encrypt the entire web. One day, we hope to strike that out and add encrypt the entire internet. All of it. Its certs that we give out already work in your browser. You may actually have already used a Let's Encrypt cert and not known it in the past 6 weeks. And in those 6 weeks, we've given out 300,000 certificates. It's hard to give the numbers without talking about the other CAs, but I will tell you that this is an extraordinary achievement, and we are very excited to have been able to do this. I want to point out that that was over the holidays too, when nobody does anything. You can see a little dip. That's pretty good. So we're off to a pretty good start. And just like every other certificate authority, Let's Encrypt validates control of the domain. It has 3 different kinds of challenges. You can do it over HTTP, put some data in a certain place, with your own key being signing it. You can do it over TLS SNI, which is some tricks around your TLS server, or you can do it in DNS, which is soon to be released. What's really cool is we have an IETF draft spec for this validation. We have outside contributors, people who are cryptography and security experts, actually chiming in on this standard that other CAs will be able to use it too. So instead of having these like ad hoc crypto systems that everybody's having to build, they can just use the same kind of ones that we're building in the Akamai spec. Let's Encrypt also provides an easy API. You don't have to deal with a web form. You don't get a phone call from a person to validate that you really are a real person. You have to prove that you control the domain. And there's tons and tons of clients. There's 3 Go clients I know of already. There's 3 or 4 Python ones that are decent, and a bunch more. There's even a web server now called Caddy that when it boots up the first time with your domains, it will check to see if it has certs for all those domains. And if it doesn't, it will actually go and fetch domain certificates from Let's Encrypt and do all the work it needs to do to validate control of the domain. It's pretty cool. And then we also helped out with, DFF has helped out with a very fancy client that will actually read in your Apache configuration files, modify it to pass the validations, and then modify it again once it has a cert. So you actually don't even know how to install certificates into your Apache server. And of course, this easy API is also in the draft spec. The point here is that automation is the goal. Because nobody's going to do this stuff unless it's so dumb and easy that anybody can do it. We want to make this beyond simple. And we want to make it so that you can dig in as far as you want to before having to, instead of having to bite off the entire hamburger all at once. You get to nibble around the edges of how crypto works. In order to induce automation, the certificates last only 90 days. Year-long certificates, like given out by most certificate authorities, never seem to get automated. They're always like, you got to put a calendar event somewhere or remember to do it, or you get an email and it just gets handled somebody. But maybe somebody leaves the organization, or the calendar event gets lost, or you forget how you did it the last time. So we've actually pushed for the 90 days just to get it automated and real. Also, there's a side benefit that if you do have a leak from Heartbleed or something, where your private key material gets out the door, it's for a maximum of 90 days instead of a full long year. And once you've got automation in place, you don't really care. You just renew them, go to town. And of course, it's open source. You can actually see my commits and the team's commits for the server-side code on the github.com. Let's Encrypt/Boulder. I got a link at the end too if you guys want that. It's wild. We actually have like new features that have just been added by some other folks, external contributors for like ECDSA certs. And you can see what it looks like to try and build a thing. It's nice. And we've done pretty well. Like I mentioned, the 300,000 certs were great. They're awesome. It's the long tail. They tend to be like not high traffic websites. Often what's super great is they're websites that did not previously have HTTPS on them at all. And so we're trying to get the fat side by integrating with large third parties. Okay, what does that mean? Well, we have DreamHost and Akamai. DreamHost, of course, is like you make a website through a web form, and you click through, and they give you a domain and the whole thing, and they host it themselves. And you know what? It's for folks not even engineers at all, not even interested, right? They're adding, I can't say when, but it's very, very soon now. They're adding integration with Let's Encrypt, where they will just like give you a Let's Encrypt HTTPS site by default for free. Nothing doing. Akamai, similarly, is a content distribution network, a place where you typically put like your static images and JavaScript, those kinds of things, where you need to go like globally. They have a setup where you hand over control of domain to Akamai, and they have a beta flow right now where they're creating Let's Encrypt certs for you. So you're getting HTTPS without even having to think about it. Without managing it either. They manage all that lifetime. You don't have to keep around private key data and deal with all the security implications of that. And I can't give out the numbers that are coming because there's a number of these integrations coming. And they are very, very large. There's a lot of domains. There's a lot of people that want to do this. And it looks like this is going to be another inflection point in the growth. We're excited. We want to do this responsibly. There's an idea in certificate authorities land called certificate transparency. It's the idea that when a CA gives out a certificate, they also send the certificate off to what's called a certificate transparency log. It's an API over the web. And then that certificate transparency log is actually cryptographically ensured to have the complete history, similar to a blockchain, Merkle tree stuff. And you can actually download these logs over the web. They're publicly available. What's really cool is people have built a bunch of scanners over these CT logs to detect like misissued certificates. Google actually was the first ones to build those tools actually. And they found a CA recently that was issuing out google.com domains, mail.google.com domains, without actually verifying that they came from Google. There was some testing code that some engineers had used. And when the CA said, oh, okay, we caught them all, and there's like about 6 or something, Google was able to go through the CT logs and find thousands more violations. What's cool about Let's Encrypt is they're doing it from day one. Every single cert gets issued. And now they just go to one CT log, but we actually deploy to 5 different ones. 3 that are controlled by Google, 1 that's controlled by Komodo, and another one that I don't remember, but I think it's an EDU. What's also cool about Let's Encrypt is it has a staging API. If you're building a client or just want to know how it works, or you want to make a fake cert to see how it would install on your server, but you don't really want to use it, you can point at the staging API. It'll do the validations, the same validations that production would do, but it hands you a bogus cert. It's, I think it's from the Happy Hacker Certificate Authority, is what it's referred to. It's pretty good. And I'll remind you that everything is zero cost. So this is like no setup. This is like, doesn't take any money. It takes very minimal amount of time. You got to get a client. So I'd like to ask you to go do HTTPS. I'd like you to play around with Let's Encrypt. I have one more dog. He's very smug. I'm pretty smug. This has been a cool project. Playing with HTTPS is important. Abstinence-only crypto education doesn't work. If you're not willing to, if we have managed to scare off an entire generation of engineers from looking at crypto. We have told them don't roll your own crypto, and what we have heard is don't use crypto. And so we need to make this better. We need a saturation of education. We need to be building on top of the high-level APIs that we have built so far. The things like libsodium, salt. We need folks that will read code reviews. If you want to go learn about crypto, I actually strongly recommend you go digging through the Golang, the Go programming languages crypto patches. They're written by some of the best engineers in the biz. And they're very clear. Go is a very easy code to read. The hardest part you'll have is with the group theory, field theory stuff inside of it. Speaking of, if you like high-end mathematics, I would please offer up learn elliptical curve cryptography and post-quantum cryptography. These are places that we do not yet have the amount of saturation that we need to really understand them as an industry, as a community. And they're fun as hell. You get to play with field theory, a little bit of category theory. It's good stuff. It might distract you from your type theory papers, but like, that's good. If you like systems, I'm a systems guy. I'd like to offer up that you learn how to build end-to-end encryption. There's no reason that something like VTech should happen again. When you're handling sensitive data for children, for anybody, being able to like store that stuff securely in your own servers is important. These are like ethical considerations that you are making. We've talked a lot about that in this conference, and this is like where the buck stops. There are migration tools like HSTS, like the CSP upgrade and secure requests. And these are the conditions that we have around free green locks. Our focus as engineers determines our future as a people. That 0.66% that Kate was talking about earlier today is super real. 0.66% of us are writing the code for the rest of us. And because of that, we are engaged in global policy making. There are governments out there right now and other large organizations that believe they should be able to go back in time and listen to your private conversations, no matter where they happened or who they happened between. They would like us to build backdoors. They would like us to implement listening devices inside of our homes, inside of our digital homes. And I don't like that. I want a future with whispers. I want a future with secrets. I want a future with private acts between loved ones. Thank you. Great. Mike, let's do this. We got a ton of time, too. Yeah.
So I enjoyed the talk. So you said at the beginning, doing HTTPS is costly. So how are you able to do this for free and with no, like...
Great question. I should have put a slide in about our sponsors. Our sponsors have been amazing. Okay, I'm going to go through some of the list. I'm not going to catch them all. This project started with the EFF and Mozilla. They both individually had been looking to start a CA project. They realized that both of them had been working in parallel and started to work together. So they started funding the first like engineering resources and stuff like that. Then we got help out from Akamai and from Cisco and a couple other places early on. They provided a ton of funding, hardware. And then we have been taking donations. The sponsorships were really hard up until we launched on December 3rd. It was hard to get money from people. But we've been getting donations from, since about that time we launched, when people realized that we were an actual real thing, that Let's Encrypt was going to ship and work. We started getting donations from Google Chrome, Facebook, a whole bunch of like hosting providers whose name I'm unfortunately totally forgetting right now. And you can go through let'sencrypt.org/sponsors, and you can see everyone that's paying us. Yeah. Does that work?
Yeah, thanks.
All right, great.
Hi. You mentioned in the talk that basically the whole certificate authority system is based on root certs,
Yeah.
which we just sort of kind of trust.
Yeah.
I feel like that means the certificate authority system is fundamentally broken.
Yeah.
Do you see a path from from that current system to a system which doesn't rely on that kind of we're trusting because we're trusting?
Right. This is a common recurring question. The short answer is no, which isn't to say that is impossible, but I do not see a path out of this. It's kind of like, what's the Churchill quote? Democracy is the worst form of government except for all the rest. All the rest of them have even worse properties. Like trust on first use means that basically everybody gets hacked on their first boot up. It's like back in the day when you had a Windows XP machine. If you didn't have all the patches in place before you got on the net, you got hacked, that kind of thing. So there are some people who have proposed some techniques. They haven't been able to work out all the rough edges yet. But is perhaps a fecund field. People are still trying. What's cool about the last couple of years, the CA system is not broken. Especially in the last couple of years, browsers and CAs have started this. They've had for a long time this thing called the CA browser forum, where they agree on these things called the baseline requirements. And the browsers have started to, so here's what's really cool. Auto update happened for browsers. And suddenly people updated their browsers. And so browsers could actually make policy decisions. And they could include things like yanking certs. Well, that's not an easy migration for them, and there's like ongoing problems with that kind of stuff. They're able and willing now to actually make policy decisions and punish CAs that are not abiding by the rules that they're supposed to. And the CAs similarly have enough votes. There's also the structure of the CA browser forum that when they agree on rules, you have to actually get a majority of both the browsers and the CAs separately. So there's actually like a balance of power there. So I actually don't agree that the CA system is broken. I do agree it's freaking weird. But it's kind of like, I'm not going to talk about fiat money and gold standard stuff, but we can do that when I get a beer in me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, you talked about Internet of Things earlier. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on like how to secure this new internet where a lot of components are not even able to, say, implement ECDSA?
Yeah, so that's going to be really hard. There's a woman on the Google security team who I follow who said something like, we're in the infancy of the Internet of Things, and the adult Internet of Things is going to be super great, but that she fears for the adolescent Internet of Things. Yeah, it's going to be really pimply and get angry for no good reason, and have a lot of very deep concerns about meaningless stuff. So what's going to happen? We're screwed, okay? We're going to start there. We're screwed. We're going to have to learn in the Internet of Things how to do the same kind of auto-update work that we've done in the browsers. They're going to have to learn how to do that stuff. We're going to have to start using the fact that we can trade off CPU and memory and Internet stuff, and they're going to have to learn how to do that. It's going to suck. I don't know how else to tell you. It's just going to suck. They're going to implement TLS, hopefully TLS 1.2, which is like the current top-of-the-line TLS, but there's another one coming out the door. And hopefully decent stuff for that. But so if you go work for one of those companies, feel free to reach out. I'll give some people, they can give you some tips, and we can work it out. Like this actually is gonna, like you're gonna have to be the ones doing this and making this happen. The people in this room, because there's not a lot of us. Okay, thank you. Which one?
I think he was there.
Yeah, let's do it.
So we started talking a little bit about HTTP2.
Yes.
Which I think the major thing that it's bringing is encryption by default. If that's
in the browsers.
Yes, it's baked right into the browser.
Yeah.
But it's not being implemented quickly, right? Like it hasn't been.
Depends on which measurement you go by.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about internet traffic, Google and HTTP, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and other major websites have already implemented it.
Yeah.
Because it was cheap and easy for them to do so.
Right.
Now, when you look at like Apache and Nginx unfortunately took a really long time to get an HTTP2 implementation going, but they do now. Apache has a mod that just came out in the latest version of Apache. So that's most of been what's blocking people is the fact that they actually just use Apache and Nginx, and they just didn't have it. But they do now, and will for future versions. And there's just going to be a migration path as folks move in. And also like Akamai, which is a huge CDN, and other CDNs similarly, have already implemented HTTP2. Akamai was super involved in the spec back when we were working together on it. I worked at a company called Twitter, and the guy next to me was on the HTTP2 spec team. And so he worked with Akamai folks. That's what I mean. But yeah, it's happening. If you go by internet traffic, it's going really well, especially for the top websites. But for the long tail, yeah, people just haven't installed the new versions of Apache and Nginx. It'll happen. It's going to happen over time. And they got to be the HTTPS. Let's encrypt. They got to do a thing. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Boom, now you.
Hi. I'm a little bit tall for the mic, so I'm not sure if this is weird.
Okay.
I came up expecting to hear a few groans because I kind of want to bring up onion routing.
I'm sorry, say again?
Onion routing?
Oh, yeah, Tor.
Yeah. So just to contrast to the CA certain model,
Yeah.
Tor's hidden service feature integrates just by its own nature,
Yeah.
self-authenticating and
Right.
end-to-end encryption by default, like self-authenticating URLs and end-to-end encryption by default.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, Tor has its own flaws, like less accountability, difficulty of monitoring. The encryption has possibly been cracked by the NSA.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if there's possibility, if you can speculate about the future, if there's some possibility for that level of self-authentication being integrated into HTTPS in the future.
I can't speculate on that.
Yeah.
But I will speculate. How about this? Tor is an important piece of infrastructure that we need to support. And speaking not as part of the Let's Encrypt team, I think it's super important and very useful. There's a reason why both the Department of Defense and crazy revolutionaries both fund it. I don't know what's going to happen with Tor and with self-authorizing stuff, like hidden services. I don't know the details of hidden services. I do know that folks really, really want to be able to get certificates for .onion addresses in order to provide authorization for like Facebook's like onion address.
Yeah, Facebook uses the .onion address with with HTTPS as well, which some people think is unnecessary. But
it's a complicated story.
It works. It's fine. I'm okay with it. But their site literally does not work on Tor browser.
Right. It's a fun story.
Yeah.
I could send you to my friend ISIS. I'll have you talk to ISIS.
Oh my God. There's actually no evidence.
No, I got it. Oh no, her name is actually ISIS.
Oh, okay.
Not. You got me. All right. Is that all?
But yeah, no. Sorry, it was a little bit of a meandering question. I didn't include my whole thought process, so I'm not sure if it made sense. But
all right. Well, we can talk later. How about that?
Yeah, maybe.
We can do it. We can unpack.
Thanks.
Yeah. No worries. Yeah.
Hi. So I enjoyed your talk and everything, but
Like the butt. Like the.
So there are, of course, are many ways of securing things in software, but what about hardware backdoors like they did with Cisco routers and such?
Yeah, totally. So you can't fix everything. Like HTTPS does not fix everything. End-to-end encryption is not a total fix. We're going to need auditable hardware, and we're going to have to. Good luck. That's just. Yep. Yes. Those are all real things.
All right.
They're not as they're. What's great about hardware hacks is unless they've actually built it, they've gotten into the production flow like they did for Juniper recently. I don't know if anybody remembers the Juniper backdoors that just occurred.
Didn't hear
really
about
cool.
that too much.
They use the actual like one of the NSA leaks. Yeah. Okay. All right. They have to either get into the production code flow, which is a totally plausible thing, or they have to do targeted surveillance on that hardware. And actually, like when you're ordering hardware, they have to actually reroute it to their own little like place in Topeka, or whatever, and then swap out the hardware or replace the firmware. So it is a real thing, and we have to really actually deal with that. And we're going to need, I believe, open source firmware. We got to stop the binary blobs and those things. This is not.
I agree.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
I agree, and also I've been hearing things that Intel might also be including backdoors and such, but that's rumors,
are you talking about the random number generator on the Intel chips?
Not just the random number generator, but also like the possibility of there actually being a 3G modem being in there as well, and like a chain of trust sort of thing.
Sure.
With like
here's the thing. I had a bunch of like tinfoil hat friends before the Snowden releases that I didn't believe at all whenever they said this thing exists, and then all those things existed. So yeah, totally sure. I don't know, man. We're totally screwed, so we have to work as hard as we can.
Thanks.
All right. Totally screwed. Yeah.
So I'm going to put on tinfoil hat for a moment. Say for example, any nation state, ours, someone else's, they go and convince some certificate authority to hand over the private key and start signing spoof certificates on their own.
Yeah.
That doesn't. So the attack you mentioned earlier about the GitHub and routing it to a different address.
Yeah.
This could still be a problem even if you have HTTPS, you just make a bogus certificate.
Yep.
If you're a nation state and you have that power.
Yep. So you know what you do with that?
What do you do?
All right. You remember those certificate transparency logs I talked about?
Yeah.
You add them to the browser. You add the browser to actually check the certificate transparency logs so that you can actually identify, so that you actually make an API such that the browser can, when they go to a website, ask the certificate transparency logs, is this the right cert? Have we seen an issuance for it? As we move to everybody doing certificate transparency, that will be something that we can turn on. That is an open attack that we very much want to avoid. And certificate transparency is the first cross-platform way we have to do that. There are also, in the browsers, they do, for some high-value domains, I believe, actually find from like Google Chrome Analytics whether or not some things are, if they're seeing certs that they're not supposed to. For instance, Firefox and Chrome do pinned certs, which are basically the idea that they have a list of domains, and there's a key value of like the domain name, and then what CAs that domain owner has said will give out certs for that domain. So if you go to google.com and you didn't get if you got a certificate from not the public key that they put in into Chrome, because it's pinned, it'll throw an error. But of course that doesn't scale. So we're trying to do certificate transparency on top of it to make a scalable solution for everybody's website.
So this seems like a very computationally expensive task. Do you feel like the latency of doing this extra work is a barrier to adoption?
It's totally worthwhile. You can also do it in batch. I mean, we have these things called, we have basically a failed standard. I didn't talk about this, but CAs are actually supposed to include these things called OCSP responses. They're supposed to serve them out. So basically, it has the same problem that you're talking about, which is where we CA projects have not had a great job of keeping those things up. And so they tend to, browsers will fail open if they're not able to access that website. Which of course, if you're a nation state, the first thing you do is block the OCSP responses, yada, 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 to see if it's been correct, whatever. Or when you're coming with a new certificate, you just have your CA do whatever. So yes, but as we make the internet better, faster and better, and we figure out how to make this stuff work better, we're just gonna start doing it. Like that's one of the reasons people didn't do HTTPS for a long time in the 90s, right? Was because we said, oh, it's too slow. It's so CPU intensive. And we just moved beyond that point. And so we're gonna move that beyond, assuming the optimism of somebody who lives in San Francisco, right? Well, we'll figure it out. It'll be fine.
Thank you.
No worries.
So as I browse over the web with Chrome, I often see like a website that is using HTTPS, but it has like a red lock on there saying that it's using some unsecured encryption protocol like SHA-1.
Yep.
And so the browsers have been trying to discourage certain encryption algorithms.
Yep.
So how does the whole like browser community enforce standards like, let's say, forward secrecy, which prevents the NSA from just retroactively decrypting all the website's data?
Yeah, okay. Oh, whoops. I'm trying to be all casual, sitting on a stool. All right. I'm just gonna hold it. So, this is one of the things that we're having to learn as a grown-up, how to grow up the internet. We're actually in the middle of this fight. There's actually been multiple attempts by certain vendors, not only CAs, but Facebook got involved in this fight. By the way, none of these opinions are the Let's Encrypt opinion. They're my opinion. They've gotten into these fights, and we're hashing it out, like over email and the CA browser forum, which is just an email list mostly, Twitter, and we're having these back and forths. What's really cool for some of the SHA-1 stuff that you're talking about, that's literally an ongoing debate because we just passed the date in January where CAs are not supposed to give out any new SHA-1 certificates. The bug happens to be mostly at issuance time, so you gotta stop issuance. Okay, so there have been folks who wanted to push that date back. And so now we're learning how to gather data. Because the folks who, the CAs don't have access to data that the websites do, that the website owners do, and the browsers don't have access to that data either. Though some of them do, like the Google folks could ostensibly like look at each other's like data to see what's going on. But for instance, how do I do this? We're learning how to do this. We just got a data dump from a guy from Amazon, Peter Bowen, PZB, on Twitter. He just dumped a data basically demonstrating that the support of SHA-2 is actually much better than we thought it was. And that's what's actually happening is not that users' machines are super far behind, but that there's these weird middle boxes that need to be upgraded. And there are vendors that are like proxies and doing weird stuff with shitty encryption coming out, like good encryption coming in the side, bad encryption going out to the server. And we actually need to put the pressure on them. We're learning how to do this. We're literally mid-stroke. And we'd love to have people who give a shit join the conversation.
Yeah. I think we need to be able to tell users which encryption technology to use and which encryption technologies not to use, because we don't want them getting confused.
Well, so that's complicated.
Yeah.
Because most people don't give a shit.
Yeah.
So that, like, I mean this like, most of y'all don't give a shit. I'm trying to convince you to give a shit. So I want you to imagine the orders of magnitude less of a shit that other people give. They have lives to lead. They're not going to be like well-paid engineers. They like actually have to just do stuff. So we unfortunately have to make it easy for them to do what they need to do, but by default make it the most secure that they can. For instance, that green lock that I showed you guys on the Chrome thing, there's a lot of evidence that nobody even notices those. They don't notice the yellow bit, they don't notice the red bit. It's weirdo OCD-ish engineers like us who know that's a thing, right? Because people, it's not like we know about like window managers and like how processes work. And people are just like, it's a screen, it shows a thing, and sometimes there's green lights and sometimes there's yellow lights, who cares? So we're working it out. We have to grow up as internet. I don't know. Good luck. I'm gonna try this again. Boom. No? Yes?
Hello? Yeah.
Okay, say the question, I'm gonna listen.
Okay, sure. First, I just want to thank you for this talk. It was really good. I think more people need to know about this. And also, I just want to extend a thank you to Let's Encrypt as well for just making HTTPS so accessible. The one thing that's kind of like bugging me is recently it came out that there was a nation state that is starting to force the users of the internet in their country to install a root cert that's issued by the nation.
Kazakhstan?
Yes.
Issue?
Yes.
Kazakhstan,
How do you kind of address this kind of issue?
So we haven't been able to, I've not been able to confirm those reports. There was a press release that was put on a website and then taken down, and I haven't heard the follow-up on that. If somebody has more recent data than like early January, late December, would love to hear it. So we don't know what's going on there yet. And what we're going to see is that is exactly the kind of stuff that we're going to have to see. And it's going to become a problem. And we're going to have to deal with it from a global diplomacy level. Like this is going to become like, like nuclear diplomacy, right? Like where we talk about how we handle nukes, we're going to also talk about how we deal with internet encryption, which is one of the reasons why we have to convince our local governments that they shouldn't be able to surveil everything. And then that same power, because we have to convince them, like show them what happens in other regimes when they allow that. Everybody thinks that they'll be able to control their keys up until the point that somebody else steals them. Kazakhstan will probably quickly reverse their decision when another nation state steals their keys, and we'll have to figure out something else. So it's gonna become, I'm not kidding, it's a global policy, where this is the moment.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's diplomacy, basically, right?
Yeah, it's just gonna, and when the things fail the way the security engineers with the tinfoil hats say they're gonna fail, they'll figure it out.
Cool, thank you.
Word. Yeah, I think so. I think it was Julia. What's up, Julia? I mean, an anonymous person, I don't know.
A website with no sensitive data on it, like my blog.
Okay.
Should I get a cert?
Okay. Yeah, I got an answer for this already. So, what you think is not sensitive is sensitive to somebody. You are going to blog about technologies that may be illegal in some countries. And that means that people are going to be able to more easily change the kind of content on your website. On top of that, any plain text connection can be used to insert an exploit into the client's browser. So every plain text connection we have offers another place for an attacker to actually slam into a bunch of clients that happen to read your blog. This is actually really common with CNN. What you do, all right, in a coffee shop or a hotel with crappy Wi-Fi is you pretend to be a wireless access point, you take over DNS, you see what all the websites people are looking on their laptops in the coffee shop and hotel around you, like CNN.com. CNN is a really good one. CNN is also currently plain text. You tell everybody's DNS to point CNN.com to your laptop. You proxy request up to CNN.com. You embed a little bit of JavaScript, and then you run that JavaScript on everybody else's machines. Especially back in the day when browsers were really bad and they had no sandboxing whatsoever. That was really quick way to exploit folks or to steal session cookies. Usually people had weirdo, some websites put up like weirdo open proxies. GitHub, no, I'm not gonna talk about that. There are open proxies that some websites, because the developers don't realize they're doing it, where they just become proxies for another website, but just changing the query parameters in a URL. And then you can start accessing those other websites through this like unencrypted website and just go to town. And it's really easy and simple, and you make people do stuff that they're not supposed to be able to do. It's really good. And then you get access to so then you gotta like implement CSP and a whole bunch of other stuff that not everybody's doing. We're gonna have like a whole discussion about like how injection works and injection attacks and XSS and the whole gamut. But basically, if you have an unencrypted connection, you can get owned. Okay. And I think I saw you stand up. Or were you first? That one? Yeah.
That's all the time we have for questions.